You are listening to the Bright Life Podcast, all about ways to stay inspired, chase your dreams, and find more gratitude in the highs and lows of the journey. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. I'm a business owner, a part-time digital nomad, a self-growth junkie, a believer in other big-hearted women, and am all about sharing tips, tricks, lessons learned, and encouragement so we can all live our biggest, brightest lives. You ready? Let's do this. Hey girl, welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to share a little bit more insight into the world of travel with you. So if you have dreams of traveling, of being able to work remotely, or to just see more of the world more often, I thought it would be fun to bring you into that side of my world and offer whatever I can in terms of things that have really supported me in being able to see more of the world. Obviously, being able to have a business that allows me to write for businesses from anywhere really supports that. So if you are interested, check out the links in my show notes for how I got started doing that and how anyone else can as well, even if you're starting without writing experience, because that's kind of the first step. But even if you don't have dreams of working remotely or building your own online business, I wanted to just share more perspective on how you can travel affordably, pros and cons of what it's like to travel for longer periods or kind of do the digital nomad life. And I've just been getting more DMs and conversations from people who are curious about learning more. And I never really realized that there were all these questions around how do you do it, or how do you choose where to go, or what are your hacks for doing it more affordably. So I'll just share what I can. I'm not an expert, I'm not a travel agent. I am just someone who about 5 or 6 years ago got this wild idea to work from coffee shops around the world instead of the coffee shops in my own hometown. And that led to this journey of seeing 35 and counting countries around the world and having so many memories balancing life, kind of working during the day on my laptop and then going out evenings and weekends and being able to sightsee and explore. So I thought for this first episode, maybe I would just even tell you how this began, how I got this idea, and that would kind of set the tone for future episodes where we talk more about money saving hacks, ways to choose where you want to go, how to break it up in the best way so you can cover the most ground the most efficiently, things like that. Okay, and definitely DM me on Instagram with your questions. I'm at Hi Jessica Johnson, and I'll try and tailor these episodes to you. But this might be a nice one just to have some context for how this wild journey even began a few years ago. Okay, so for me and my husband, we started traveling, as I mentioned, about 5 or 6 years ago. The funny part is, even though we are quite traveled now, we did not travel internationally together hardly ever before that. We'd gone to Italy once on vacation, and it was a big trip for us. It was like planning everything down to the detail, and it felt really far, and it was a massive trip for us at the time. So it's not like we immediately were these people who knew how to travel and knew how to get around and felt confident doing so. We were really fresh. We were probably like most people who had, done a few trips here and there. We would go down to Mexico for the weekends once in a while. That's obviously a blessing to be able to even say that we get the opportunity to travel at all. But I'm just trying to set it up for you. Like, it's not like we knew exactly every single place we should go. We just kind of were like, did it once in a while, and it was a great trip, and that was what we knew. But we found ourselves both working from our own businesses, so jobs we could do anywhere, and we would work a lot of the time in coffee shops in Seattle, where we lived. And so after many days of going to the same coffee shop and having a similar structure of day where we'd wake up, pack our laptops and go to the coffee shop and get our coffees, spend the day there, do our work, and then come home and have our evening activities with friends or, around town, errands, that kind of thing, go to the gym. We kind of got this idea of like, why don't we just do this from somewhere else in the world? if we're just sitting at a coffee shop, why not go to a coffee shop in Paris or in Spain or things like that? And so we started just talking about it and thinking about it. And this is before the pandemic had happened. So remote work hadn't even really taken off yet. Even to this day, sometimes we talk about it and we're like, where did we get this idea and what made us think we could pull it off? But that is the beauty of leaning into your imagination and not putting constraints on yourself, right? And also having a community or a person that you can bounce these ideas off of. And we talk about that in other episodes on this podcast, that your imagination is your superpower. So don't let anyone tell you that your dreams are crazy or too big, because your imagination sets the container for what's possible for you. And I think this is one of those examples where, because we just dreamt it up, it was able to then become a reality with a lot more intention and planning. So what we decided to do was, our lease was about to end in a few months in Seattle, and we lived in a downtown condo. And so instead of renewing our lease, we decided that we would sell our belongings, most of them, anything that wasn't sentimental. We would put, the rest in storage or with family. So we did that. We spent a few weeks packing everything up, selling everything, and that also gave us some funds to then be able to go travel with. And what we figured is, instead of putting all of our rent money into a lease every single month, we would just apply that as our budget that we had to travel with and to live with overseas. And so I would then look at Airbnbs or hotels or whatever we could do to make sure we hit that monthly budget. Now, in the following episode, I'll share more ideas around how to travel on a budget, because we definitely had to be a little creative. Like, instead of going to places in the height of the season, so instead of going to Europe in the summer, we started out in fall, so off season a little bit, and headed into winter. And it actually worked really well for us. I mean, we were just so thrilled to even be able to travel that we didn't even really care. I mean, we had the best times at these holiday markets and bundling up, and then, rushing to the co-working offices and coffee shops in the snow. So for us, it was like all good, because we were just so thankful for the opportunity to travel that we didn't care if we were there in summer, fall, winter, spring. It was like all good. And so that's kind of a tip I have, is if you want to get started and want to do it more affordably, is like, go in off seasons, because you can get things for maybe half or a third of the price. But that's what we did. That's how we got our start. And we would stay for a few weeks at a time in places, and that also allowed us to then get better discounts on places. And what you have to be mindful of is just making sure that you're adhering to the working or visa requirements of wherever you go. So there's certain rules in places, and you just, of course, like anything in life, you're mindful of that. Like, if there's a speed limit, you go the speed limit, so just watch for things like that. But that really got us our start. And what we would do then is try and group continents. So we had one really amazing season starting off in Europe, and we did Spain and France and Italy and Belgium and Amsterdam. And I mean, I'm mixing a few, right? Yeah, I can't even remember all of them. But that allowed us to see so much of a place by making one big hop over there. And then we would come home when we needed to, and, back to the States, and we'd visit our family or stay with our family. And it sounds a little chaotic and hectic when I talk about it, and it was. But again, we were so grateful for that chance to be able to travel that it was totally fine. We were like happy to stay with our family for a little while out of our carry-on suitcases, and to live out of just a few main, clothing items. Like, it was all good, because it was the trade-off for being able to have these experiences. And what we would do is we would work during the day, same as we would do in the States, and then evenings and weekends were our time to explore. And so we would go experience the restaurants for dinners, and on the weekends we would pack as many tourist things as we could, and we'd see all the attractions and sites. And then back during the work week and the normal 9 to 5, it worked for us to really keep that flow consistent, because it just gave us this routine and normalcy around, these are our work hours, and then these are our play hours. And here and there we would take a day off, but it felt like a real treat. It felt like, okay, this is a Wednesday we're taking off, just like it would in a more corporate or 9 to 5 position. It didn't ever really get willy-nilly. And I think that's been one of the reasons we've been able to sustain this for so long is we really have kind of a nice cadence and structure to our work life and our out of work life, and just as we would at home. And so that's what we did. And then once we were done with Europe, we jumped to South America, and that became a place we experienced for a while. And I mean, it's really, we made it up as we went along, and we just made this list of these places would be great to see. I've heard about this. I've thought about this. We would watch YouTube videos at night to get ideas of our next place and to see what it was like from other YouTube vloggers. And that just informed how we would do it. And we would try and stay in one area for a long time so that we could jump regionally versus having to make that really long flight back to the States over and over again, which gets really grueling and long, but also adds up expense-wise to be doing that nonstop. So it was kind of like, ground in the States, then go make your trip to another continent, spend as much time there as you could within the requirements, and jump regionally, which was a lot more efficient and also a lot more budget friendly. And then once time was up, head back to the States and, rinse and repeat. So that was kind of our system, and since then, there have been seasons where we've gotten our home bases in the States and stayed for longer periods. And then when we get the itch, we have done it again. And that just works for us. So we're in a season now where we're a little bit ready, I think, to have maybe one home stateside and one home abroad, and kind of jump between these two parts of the world. And we're figuring out visa requirements and that kind of thing, working with attorneys on that. But that's how it all began. And so if you have this dream of traveling more, or maybe you're not even that fulfilled by your job, so you're like, why am I staying here? Like, could I live somewhere else? Could I travel somewhere else for an extended period? You absolutely can. I mean, there was nothing special about us either. It was, we gave up our lease. We stayed with family when we had to. We sublet our places when we needed to. But it's so doable. And so much of the world too, if you're listening from the US or Europe, so much of the world is more budget friendly than the US and Europe. So there's a whole big world to see. And there's so many places where you can work within your budget, whatever it is. So I understand what a blessing and privilege it is to have this travel experience. But I also want to just give you hope and excitement that there's opportunities and there's ways to totally crush it if you have this dream and are ready to go for it. It can be something that you do within a few months like we did, where we were just like, you know what, now's the time, let's figure it out. Or you can plan for this in a few years, and you can save a bit each month, and you can have this vision of where you want to go, and you can get it all together. There's no right or wrong, but the world is a beautiful place. And even though it's a bit chaotic, maybe I'll do an episode on that, like pros and cons to traveling and working remotely or being a digital nomad. The memories we have, I would not trade for anything. I think that you just feel like you fit so much life into 1 week or 1 year. And sometimes I have a hard time even remembering when a friend calls where we are. I'm like, wait, okay, what place are we in? Or where were we just last? So but I love that feeling of just being like, I've done so much in the last 2 weeks, And so for me and my personality and for my husband's, that really works for us. And that's how we desire to design our life and what we want to have memories from. And so if that speaks to you, then it could be for you as well. So definitely let me know in the comments or the DMs what questions you have, what ideas this sparks for you, and I'll be happy to be an open book and share as much as I can about it. But I hope this gives you some creative inspiration and ideas around getting out there and seeing the world, whether for you that means a country you've always dreamt of far away, or more of your own home and backyard, or beautiful camping spots or places around the US. We live in such a beautiful world, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to experience it. All right, thank you so much for being here. And again, links and show notes if you want to learn more about an online business, such as copywriting or anything else about my journey. I put all my links there. Thank you so much for listening in. If you love this episode, I have 2 things you are going to love. One is a free copywriter training full of 5 steps to build a profitable copywriting business as your own boss, no matter how much experience you're starting with. Copywriting is what took me from a 9-to-5 to freedom as my own boss, to travel, choose my schedule, replace my corporate income, and have time to work on creative projects like this podcast. And I'd love to give other women the same opportunity. Another, of course, is my book, Your Bright Life. You can find it on Amazon or Audible, where I narrate the audiobook, so it's kind of like a podcast in book form. All of these things are in the podcast show notes. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate you and your review so much, and I'll see you back here next Thursday.